So we should be getting started here in just a minute. Let's see. Cool. Is Isaac in here already? If not, I can go ahead and kind of get us kicked off here. So first thing, just some housekeeping. Want to make sure that everyone knows that we can actually put on captions. So if you do want to listen to this and maybe English isn't your first language, you can go ahead and go into Zoom in the settings and you can change the captions to whatever your preferred language is. A couple other things, we're going to be putting a Q&A out. So at the end, we'll have some time for some questions and we'll be able to answer those live. So feel free to add those questions to the Q&A chat throughout the session, and we'll get to those at the end. If you do attend this and you are participating, there is a chance to win some Mapbox swag. I've got my Mapbox polo here. I don't know if we'll be giving those away, but you'll get some sort of swag item. So be on the look for that. And then anytime you want to go check out this recording or any other recordings from the day, you can see in the lobby, and we'll have some recordings available at mapbox.com/build. So go check that out. And you'll be able to maybe rewatch this if you missed something, or go and check out some other sessions that we had throughout the day. So there's plenty of content. Sometimes they're at the same parallel time. So in case you've got some FOMO from another session, you'll still be able to see those. But in my opinion, you're in the right one right now, so don't worry about that. Cool. So why don't we go ahead and get right into this? If in case you didn't know, you're in the Leaders in Location Telecommunications session. So today we're going to be talking about some of the challenges in telco, how location fits into the telco world. We're specifically going to be talking with Isaac Calvo from Verizon. I'll let him introduce himself in just a bit. My name is Kieran. I work on the business team here at Mapbox. I'm the really lead out our strategic partnerships in the telco space. So I work with a lot of the carriers and other ISPs in North America. That includes Verizon and the other big carriers you can maybe think of. I've been at Mapbox for about 5 years. I think my 5-year anniversary is this week, which is pretty exciting. So I've seen a lot of different, customer types and different customers that we work with, but really in the telco space, I think there's a lot of interesting location challenges. So it's been great to work with Verizon and work with Isaac specifically, and I'm really excited to talk about some of the problems that we've tackled over the past, couple of years working together. So with that, maybe I'll let Isaac jump in and give a little introduction for himself.
Thank you, Kieran. Can you guys hear me just fine?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Isaac Calvo. Of course, I've been working with Kieran and Mapbox for almost a year. And yes, I'm heavily involved with the Gizmo products, which is our kids tracker in the field, with the primary purpose of providing parents some peace of mind, letting you know where their kids are, whether they're at school or at home, and just their first communication device in the market. We've been doing this for a very long time. I actually started with Gizmo about 7 years, and we've gone through multiple generations. What you're seeing here on the slide is our Gizmo Watch 3, which does video calling, does things like geofencing, does things on-demand locate, as well as real-time tracking. These are some of the key features that we really leverage Mapbox today to give the parents the accuracy they need, whether it's in the city or suburban areas, or whether it's using satellite images to enable them to keep track of their children. One of the other features that you may not see here on the slide, which we'll demo later, is a video how Mapbox enables this with real-time tracking for you. Thank you, Kieran.
Perfect. And yeah, it's been really interesting to work on Gizmo with Isaac, because there are a lot of specific challenges and insights that we have to think about when we're thinking about the use case of Gizmo, which is really for families and specifically working with children. So there's a lot of user experience things we have to consider when we're working with that type of audience, which is sort of unique from some of the customers that I've worked with. So always keeping that first and foremost, and kind of the safety elements in mind is really important. And that's been kind of top of Isaac's mind. Every call we're on, we're always thinking about that as kind of first priority. So very cool. Um, and yeah, just a little bit more about Isaac, distinguished product engineer from the Gizmo team. Uh, I've we've started working together probably this time last year, just having some serious conversations about moving Gizmo to some of the newest, latest, and greatest Mapbox work, and basically working together to figure out what does that look like from end to end, and how do we actually bring that platform over to Mapbox as a whole, and thinking about the mobile side, thinking about how that interfaces with some of our services and how we can actually customize some of those experiences for the Gizmo team. So that was really from a year ago to today, getting from idea to implementation, then to launch, and then now seeing the impact of that rollout has been really interesting. So we'll cover more of that, and maybe we'll do a deeper dive into how Gizmo works in the next slide here. So
Thanks, Kieran. All right, so this is actually using Mapbox today. Where you're looking at here is Jason. Jason's actually one of our fake kids at the Baskin Ridge office that we wanted to do this test. And what we're starting here is real-time tracking using Mapbox. And the Mapbox tool, as you can see here, it enables us to do breadcrumbing of the child. The parents can zoom in, can zoom out. When we're plotting this, typically every 10 seconds, it's a small device, so we're trying to get as much real-time tracking as possible. And the idea here and the use case for us here, there may be situations where a kid maybe misses the school bus, or you want to know where they're at, or perhaps you're at a park and you're just trying to get, precise location to see where they're headed. What we love about this with Mapbox too is that we can show the location history in a breadcrumb history view in the app. We can also switch to satellite images while we're doing this. We can go back to the vector view. We can also track to any child in the map by flipping to another. So if you have a situation where you have two children, we can run the same instance of the map and track two children at the same time. So this is just some of the features that enables us that's unique to the Gizmo. Some really important things for us is the level of details. We do want to be able to see the streets. We want to be able to see the name. Now, this is a very suburban area. There's not a lot on there. But if we were to zoom in with the Mapbox version 11, which they will essentially this demo that's running for 5 minutes, you would see more level of details. Couple things to keep in mind that we limit this to 5 minutes due to battery. We do want to conserve battery because the watch has to report GPS, every 10 seconds. We also rely on other technologies for location, but the way it works in the back end, we get this location from the watch, we give the lat and longs to Mapbox, and we convert that to a meaningful address and plot it on the map. So, pretty straightforward. And, version 11 does really well. So you can start seeing the buildings. That's actually our corporate headquarters in Baskin Ridge. And there's the satellite images. Now, one interesting use case for us is the satellite image that was really critical for us is that we want this to be as up to date as possible. Maps are great, but when it comes to tracking the children, you have to be able to see what's the surrounding, what's in the building, where they're really at, or the indoors or the outdoors. And this is something for us that's paramount. We've actually looked at many other map providers and just compare satellite images and street maps as well as the map just to ensure that we can deliver the best experience possible. And we're constantly researching, we're constantly looking to improve. And one thing that we love with Mapbox is that anytime there's anything wrong, they're very quick to turn this around for us. So we give the feedback and they update it for us, they research it, and we're able to get these updates. And that's something that's important for us when our parents reach out to us to say, hey, I have an issue, can we resolve this? And historically, this has been a very high success for us. And that's one of the key components for us to using Mapbox. Thank you, Kieran.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that the Gizmo team was looking at when we first started looking at implementation was how does the map user experience work, and how I think at the beginning you were talking about doing some customization and there were some like list of requirements that you were looking at, but then when we had a kind of deeper conversation looking at V11 and some of the out of the box, styles that we have with Mapbox standard, you actually ended up going with those because those were sort of ready to rock, ready to go for a lot of the user experience requirements that you actually were looking at. So I know that, you have the satellite styles, and then you've also got the Mapbox standard, which, shows a lot of the building features and the addressing and makes it very easy to get a sense of what's going on. So I know that was kind of an interesting conversation that we had at one point as well.
Yeah, that's a good call out, Kieran. And the other reason for that too is like we kind of this is probably more of a feedback. We kind of got really excited with the Mapbox Studio because we can customize it to our own branding, look, and feel. There's a lot we can do there, but going with the standard style just gave us a little bit of speed to market. So we were able to integrate this in 3 months, but it gave us the flexibility to offer the best solution out of the box. So in areas like New York, for example, where you have 3D vectoring and mapping, it looks great, right? You have that 3D mapping, you can zoom in, you can zoom out. It's a much different experience than it is in an area that's very suburban. And that's a very huge benefit for us because we do have children there as well. Obviously, we love to have that everywhere, but it's a growing area across the board. But it's definitely a key feature for us, and we wanted to expand on that too to utilize other features that I can't discuss today, unfortunately. But there's a lot of stuff in the roadmap for us going forward that aligns with the whole smart family ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think having the context is the most important part for parents and kids. Because if you see your, your child is on the map and there's no like key clues around to know what they're close by to or where that is, you have to go through the extra steps of then figuring out what's going on. But if you can just quickly glance at the map, either in this kind of map view style or in the satellite style like we were talking about before, you can just quickly get a sense of where they are because you have all that context built into the screen right away. So I think that's one of the most important parts. And that lends to it's like the 3D view, the satellite view, just having POIs and things like that on the map so that you just know, oh, they're close by to this, shopping center or this area that I know or this school that we're familiar with. So that's really important. Um, we had talked a little bit about geofencing. Do you want to talk about how geofencing is used in your experience today, or how if
Yeah,
it?
I can touch. Yeah, we can talk a little about geofencing. So the geofencing for us, it's very basic. So, but we have our own our Gizmo location engine running on the watch. So with this engine, what we do is we can set a parameter, let's just say 700 meters, and that can be the school. And the idea is you set it from a start time and end time. Let's say the school hours are 8 and 3. When the child's in school, we show them in school in the map view. The parents know, hey, the kid made it to school. But if for some reason there's a breach, the gizmo has the logic to start reporting locations. And that basically comes as like saying, hey, Jason's is not at school. And the parents can see that in the map. So we'll show the geofence with a circle on the map, but we'll also show what the child physically is. And this is where the geofence comes in, where the parent can say, hey, my kid left the school. Now let me do real-time tracking and see where they're really at. And we also have the logic of when the child enters the geofence, we can say they got back to school for that window. And you can send multiples throughout the day, which is kind of nice. They cannot overlap today, but you can definitely set multiples, which is kind of the whole purpose. And the idea behind it here, once again, is to conserve battery and be precise. But Mapbox is able to do this for us today with the map. And the geofence is available to all the users that are guardians on the app, which is nice too.
Yeah, and I think that's also useful from a safety perspective because I'm imagining there's a push notification when something unexpected is occurring. So then the parent can quickly get a sense like, oh, something's not right. This is not the expected destination they're in. That makes a lot of sense. Really cool.
Yeah. We also did something for the child too. We have the option for the device to do a check-in. So the child can be at school or anywhere and she says, hey, let me just check in with my parents. And we just send a simple, location request, but whether it's GPS, Wi-Fi, or cell triangulation at that moment to let the parents know where the child is. It says, hey, I'm checking in and I am at X, Y, and Z location. So that's just another way we use Mapbox today with the Gizmo Watch.
Very cool. Um, Maybe we should go to
Yeah.
the next slide here.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we kind of mentioned at the beginning, but I think, safety and privacy are really center focus for an experience like this because families are using it, kids are really center focus in the experience. So tell me a little bit about privacy and how you think about that at Gizmo, because that's a really important part of the, kind of history of Mapbox is we've always been privacy first. So privacy focused experiences and making sure that we have our customers comfortable with, how we're using location data is really a kind of a part of the ethos of our whole company. So I know we've had some interesting conversations about that over the past year. So maybe we could talk about that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. And just for anybody listening, obviously talk to your attorneys, your privacy counsel. They're there to support you. So this is just from my experience and what we're targeting. So from when it comes to child privacy, yes, we have to abide by COPPA. It's very important. Privacy is paramount for our team. We wanted to make sure that whatever information is from child, whether it's to Mapbox or other partners, we only want to give that data and store that data as needed necessary for the parents to use the features. So one of the biggest asks we had for Mapbox was we wanted that lat and long information to be dropped, right? Once it's served its purpose, we don't want to store anywhere. One, it ensures security and privacy for the child. Two, it allows us to comply, with all the privacy regulations at a state level, as with COPPA, as well as any other privacy laws coming in flight. And there's a lot of information out there. And once again, I want to make it clear: talk to your privacy counsel, talk to your line of business attorneys. But it's just one of the things that we were able to partner with Mapbox and meet that for us to ensure that we can deliver that experience. And we're very happy with that today. And thank you, Kieran, for doing that extra work for us. I know it was not easy to meet our stringent requirements for privacy for us.
Yeah, and I think your group's really at the tip of the spear when it comes to privacy and thinking about those safety requirements. But I would say like Verizon as a whole has thinks about these things a lot, and I think that our teams working together have really kind of focused in on that and worked on some ways that we can actually figure out the best solution for a lot of our different implementations. So I think that's really a key maybe differentiator that Mapbox has is that we do consider that like a foundational piece of our business is thinking about privacy. So yeah, super interesting. Maybe talking about another topic here. When we talk about, excuse me, we talk about the future of IoT and sort of these family tracking or other IoT use cases. What are some of the things that you're thinking about going forward without giving away your secret sauce of your roadmap, but what you're excited about in the space and how we can, at Mapbox think about those things and maybe kind of steer our roadmap in the right direction?
I think for us, and this is my personal opinion, not Verizon's. I think I'm more excited about is what is 5G going to enable us to do in the kids wearable space. There's a lot of opportunities there for us to leverage things with location services using our 5G services. So we're very excited for that. As far as what other solutions are out there that I can share, I think the 3D Map Studio and the idea of adding other services on top. For example, I know there's things with the weather apps out there that share different layers, and you can kind of show what's happening with thunders. Maybe leveraging some of that information can be a benefit to the parents and the child. So that's just some use cases that we have explored without sharing too much. I mean, we don't necessarily have anything else that I can share beyond that, but I think 5G for us and just Map Studio is going to be an interesting outlook for
Yeah,
us.
definitely. And I think one of the tricky things about any type of tracking app is that you do have to have connectivity for these things to be working effectively. And I think that we've talked about some interesting things where it's like if you're, we have solutions at Mapbox where if there's an offline component, then you can kind of sync up when you do get connectivity and then see the history there. So kind of balancing that. Most of your users are probably in a somewhat connected environment, but I know we've talked about instances where folks are going on trails and things, and maybe that's like the most important time when you want to know where your kid is or where, any kind of family member that you're tracking is. So those types of solutions I think are interesting to think about too. It's like low connectivity. What does that 5G coverage expansion look like and how it impacts those kind of situations too? So yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I was going to ask about when it comes to future features is how, I think Gizmo specifically talking about tracking, families and things. What are other things that Verizon as a whole is thinking about from an IoT perspective? I think there's tons of applications. And when you're talking about the 5G expansion here, it's basically you can track anything. I think we've seen folks doing tracking in sort of a business context when it comes to long-term logistics and tracking shipments, tracking cars on the road, tracking, family members and individuals. Basically anything that has connectivity can become a tracking device, and that could include the phone or a smart device. So I think there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to IoT of where those things can go, especially related to like, everywhere having connectivity at some point. So
I think what's interesting in connectivity versus, and location service, I think everybody expects some kind of location services for every product. I mean, look at headphones today. Most of them have some kind of Bluetooth connectivity you can locate throughout the house if you lose them. Even connected cars have that today. I mean, we have products in Verizon like Hum, Smart Family, you got Gizmo, you got CareSmart, right? They're all using some type of, location technology. And I think it's fair to say that everything out there has some kind of connection and location services, with it, whether it is, precise to 1 meter, whether it's connected with GPS or Wi-Fi or self-triangulation, you have some kind of service that's attached to it that benefits the customer. So once again, it's the expectation. I think it's more of the core now.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that kind of calls back to what we were saying about the privacy. When everyone has maybe like 3 or 4 devices that are tracking their location or the location of something that they own, I think it becomes even more important to know that you're working with a partner in location that has privacy and the customer's privacy in mind, and keeps that kind of balanced with kind of the use case and the effectiveness of the service. So yeah, as that becomes more and more ubiquitous, and I mean, I can already think of like 5 or 6 things that I have location tracking on for. It's important to have, as we go into the future, a really kind of forefront perspective of privacy and that focus. So super interesting. Yeah. Um, you know, one of the things that maybe I wanted to ask you about is working with Mapbox. How has your experience been? Like, what are some things that you could say to somebody that's getting started today or just joined this webinar? It's like, I've never worked with Mapbox before, but I'm interested in getting started. What was your experience like working with us as sort of a partner and going through that phase from beginning to end to where we are today?
I think from our experience, especially with Gizmo, is the support system. Whenever we had questions or challenges, right, we were able to upload the code, and the team was able to look at the code and assess and figure out solutions. Especially when we had a unique, that I wouldn't call it 100% out of the box experience, because we were looking to bring certain features with Mapbox that we had with our previous solution into Mapbox. But that alone is worth everything to us, because the faster we get the support, the more of a partnership we have, the better we can deliver these products. If we have a crash or we have some weird issue that we're seeing on whether it's on Android Vitals or Xcode Vitals or whatever crash logs, we can share that with Mapbox, and within the next day we usually have a response, and sometimes we even have a solution already, or at least a roadmap to address that. Mm-hmm. So that for me is key. So from a starting perspective, I think that helps too. Sometimes we made mistakes, and we learn from Mapbox, and sometimes Mapbox makes mistakes and they learn from us, and that's a two-way street.
For sure. Yeah, and I think we have a whole team that's supporting Verizon. We've got myself and the kind of business side of the house, which is pretty standard for most customer interactions that you would see. But I think that where we go a level deeper is really on the support side, and having that responsive, interaction, whether that's, something as simple as like, hey, this address is wrong, or we think that this address should be corrected. We can put that into our corrections pipeline and get you a update on the map within a couple of days. And then we've got more sophisticated interactions where it's, we sit down and we do like a solutions overview and say, hey, this is our roadmap. This is your roadmap. Where are we going? What makes sense? And we're talking about doing a workshop in person just in a couple of months. So I think that's going to be another layer of, partnership where, not everyone can do that and lend those resources. But I think that Mapbox gets pretty hands-on with our partners in that regard. So that's all. And like you said, we learn a ton from you, you learn a ton from us. And I think that kind of level of interaction is really important to the relationship. So yeah, I've learned a lot just from working with you and understanding some of the challenges here. So Um, what one of the other things I was going to ask, when you have challenges from a user experience perspective, how do you go about thinking about that? Do you do sort of A/B testing? Do you do any type of user studies where you're asking, end users how they're actually working with those things? Like how do you think about those things from a consumer app experience perspective?
So we have a huge partnership with the product team, right? So they do a lot of research as well as their UX UI team. So it really depends, right? First, we want to understand what the real problem is. What's the story behind this? What's the pain point? Whether we're going to do any CMI studies, consumer market insights, whether we're going to do usability testing, we'll schedule that, talk to kids, talk to parents, and this is all done by that CMI team. And that is crucial for us to understand, what are the features, what are we want to fix and understand. So things like, I'm going to use an example with I'm trying to think if I can share this. I'm going to use the weather app, right? It's a kid's weather app. It uses location, behind the scenes, but the weather app, does the kid understand it? Does he know what the icons are? Does he know how to swipe to get the weather? Do they know how to check in? These are things that we need to understand how the user interacts, especially with children, because, we had a very interesting age demographic that these products are being used. Well, we have our target, I, I've seen children, as young as 4 using wearables and as old as 13, and even some, older children use them, as well for other reasons on the spectrum, which really benefits them. So having these usability studies, to determine what features and how we design is important. And that is something that's driven with our CMI team or UX UI team and product, as well as our team, the TPD engineering team, tech product development team. So it's really a family effort. And that's the joke is, with the family team, but it really does take a village.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, even just like thinking about, user studies with adults are difficult enough. And I think that adding the element of like, okay, well, this is a child and there's kind of a range of ages that maybe have different needs and understanding of how these things work. That being said, I feel like young kids today are just like super tech savvy and can pick up things way faster than probably some adults. So that's kind of interesting too. But yeah, seeing the other thing is like the interaction between the parent and the child, because that's really the core experience that you're exploring there. So it's like, is the same experience that the kid is using going to work for the maybe older demographic of the parents and how that interacts. So that's a really interesting challenge to face. But when you look at those types of studies, like how do you determine what features you're going to build next? Like what are some of the things that indicate to you like, okay, this is a gap that we need to address, or maybe it's something that you haven't seen from the studies, but you're like, we have an intuition that this is where our users would really benefit. Like, how do you think about that when you're thinking about the roadmap?
So we do internal power user trials with Verizon employees. So any Verizon employee that participates, they'll get a Gizmo watch. So a lot of times we get immediate feedback from parents, and they'll say, "Hey, this is the feature I want," or "I want to have grandma do this," or "grandparents do this," or "My cousins have access." So a lot of times it's really just based on feedback. We do take voice of the customer as a higher weight when it comes to these studies, because these studies can be more like, it's very opinionated, right? It's based how you set those questions. But when we get direct feedback from a user, that has a lot of weight. So we'll take that feedback and then we'll look like, do we have any data to back it up? Do we have any usability? Do we have any other source that can help put a weight on this? And then we as a team, we go and basically just prioritize. And then we find out how we can do this. We love to do this kind of stuff because it just adds more value. So it's not just doing it because someone else has the feature. Sometimes we do look at the competitors and be like, hey, they're doing it. But the question I always have is, does it actually benefit the child and the parents? Is something they really want to use? So, we have finite resources, so we want to target things that add more value to the customer.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's interesting too, because I like when you said the voice of the customer is like the number one piece, because you can do a million user studies and come up with different prioritization of what you would do. But if it's straight from the mouth of the customer, that's always a good indicator of what you can do. So pretty interesting. That's kind of how we think about things too. When you tell me something, I'm like, okay, that's going to go straight to the product team a little bit better than doing a study. So yeah, awesome. So I think we're right about at the Q&A time here. I think there's some questions rolling into the chat. I can kind of pick some of these up here. And if the audience has more questions, keep them coming. We can kind of try to get to as many of these as we can. Trying to pull up my Q&A window here.
I'm in the
But
same boat.
yeah, I think I've got some questions that the team is feeding to me here. Um, what? Okay, here's a good one. What have you found is most important to Gizmo users when it comes to location features? What's like the most commonly requested thing that you're coming across or that you have implemented that people have said, hey, this is what we wanted?
Real-time tracking. They want to see where their child is at all times. The number one thing that parents want is know where their kids and then communicate. It seems very basic, but it's paramount.
For sure. I mean, that makes sense. What is like the real-time tracking? You've had that out more recently, right? That's something that's sort of a newer feature. Has that been something that has been a big change with feedback when you've started rolling those things out? Like, what are some of the questions that folks have when they see that?
Yeah, so we launched real-time tracking with the first LTE Gizmo Watch 1. Originally, our first Gizmo, which was a Gizmo Pal and Gizmo Gadget, they were back in the old network CDMA. We didn't have the ability of real-time tracking, so we had to hit the on-demand locate button, and you had to wait. It would take about a minute to get the location. So really it just comes down to frequency of updates. So we have increased, the logic where you open the app or the child does certain things or battery updates will get some location updates just to have more refresh updates. And then adding that real-time tracking just kind of gives the user the power, like, hey, I want to locate and I don't want to disregard the battery right now because I understand that has an implication. But giving that power to the user, whether they can real-time track for 5 minutes and they can extend it to 10, it just empowers them to use it when they absolutely need it. And that's very important. Outside of location, really comes down to, believe it or not, communication. It's just the child communicating, hey, I'm at school or I missed my bus, or whether it's by audio or by a text message. That's really important. It's just those two combined is really the key advantage and their core functionality, what's really important. Everything else is just nice to have. Like, kids want to play games, parents want to have more control. So it's just kind of balancing out, what the kid wants and what the parents want.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like with the use case, there's probably, you know, two or three critical points in the day where there's a transition occurring where that's where you would want to use the real-time location or where the communication is most important, like getting picked up from the bus stop or going to soccer practice and maybe it's at a new field or something like that. And those pickup times and drop-off times are always going to be maybe the most important. So it makes sense that you wouldn't want to have the battery draining all day with the real-time stuff. And then you'd also want to have the communication lines be like very open when you have, that type of experience enabled. Um, and yeah, out of curiosity, this is like a question that I have. Do you have like Snake on the device, like the game? What kind of games are on there?
Uh, so we designed a couple of games. We have tic-tac-toe, which is a lot of fun. The kids like that. We added a puzzle game where you have like little boxes you can design the puzzles. We added Simon Says on there. We have some activity games like jumping now. So that's something that's, just to keep the kids active. And then we have our fitness application on there. So you can do things like hiking, running, biking, that kind of stuff. So
That's
it's,
awesome.
once again, it's a mix of both. And then, believe it or not, one of the most popular features that it's not really a game is picture and video calling.
Oh, that's
The kids
awesome.
really like to the kids really like to express themselves.
That's cool. And I do think that the cool thing about Gizmo and some of these wearables is that it lets kids sort of get familiar with the smartphone world and kind of the experience that they're going to eventually go into as an adult where everyone has smartphones. But it sort of gradually brings them into that without having some of the dangers that maybe having a smartphone at, 10 years old would have. So I think that's one of the interesting things about, the experience and maybe why so many parents are interested in it. It's because it gives you the kind of safety and peace of mind of being connected without all of the open world of the internet with all the dangers that occur there. So that's really cool.
It's
Um,
also just a good entry. It's you're not buying a very expensive smartphone and you have more controls. This Gizmo doesn't have access to the internet or things, social media. So it's really locked.
yeah,
And that's important for parents too, especially when schools are, banning smartphones and that's from being brought in class.
yeah. I've heard that some schools are making you get those bags that you put the phone in at the beginning of the day, kind of like when you go to a concert or a stand-up comedian, like that's what schools are starting to do. Maybe that's a good idea. I don't know how kids are going to react to that, but it is a tricky world for parents to navigate, and I don't think that that's. It seems like this is kind of hitting a part in the market where parents are thinking about these things and trying to navigate this new world of social media and kids being online is pretty tough. So one question that's popped up a couple times is, does Gizmo work everywhere or internationally, or is this a US only application? What if kids are going abroad with their parents on vacation? How does it work there?
So today, it only works in U.S. territory. So obviously, USA, Alaska, you got Puerto Rico, Hawaii, right? Um, so no Canada, no Mexico, or abroad yet. Maybe in the future. I can't allude to that, but yes, only U.S. today.
Okay. Well, Mapbox will be there if you need international maps. So we'll be right around the corner. So
Good
um,
question though.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. I'm looking at some other questions here. Um, One of the questions from the audience is asking about navigation experiences and if that's something that users are asking for. Is that possible with, some of the smartwatches and wearables that, Gizmo is looking at, or maybe navigation experiences in the app for the parent or for the child?
So I can't talk from a Verizon engagement perspective, but what I can tell you from what I know in this field, if you use Apple watches or you use Google Pixel watches or Samsung, you do have some navigation stuff on there. I use it personally with my Apple Watch sometimes when I'm in the city. It's just kind of nice to get the haptic feedback and let you know when you need to turn a street. So, but once again, a lot of these experiences are either paired by Bluetooth to a smartphone. So I think it's still a little early. I have looked at other options out there, but is it for Gizmo? I don't know. I think that's something that I would have to ask my team, to do CMI studies and see what the feedback is. Um, does it have benefits? Yes. I would also argue that kids usually going to be at school and at home and we're parents, and usually they're going to be the one navigating.
Yeah,
So
definitely. It goes back to what you were saying. It's like, where's the value add? And is that lift of the build and maybe the cost that comes with like the engineering resources to build that, is that worth the benefit to the child or to the parent? And it probably depends on where they are, right? If it's a suburban area where they could have to walk, miles and miles to get home, that might not make sense. But when we're talking about New York City, it's like that could be very useful where it's a walkable place, but then you're a kid walking around New York. It's a balance, right? So there just needs to be
yeah,
considerations of who would be using it and how it'd be used. But looks like we've got time for about one more question. Let's see. I'm trying to pull up some of the things in the chat here. Um, yeah, what advice would you give to other folks in the IoT space or in the consumer app space, maybe other consumer wearable companies, of bringing location and into their experiences and how to think about that? What are some of the challenges that you've thought about? What are some of the benefits that you didn't really understand before you started working with location, and how do you balance that?
really understand your customer, like really understand, like put in their shoes, whether it's as a parent, as a grandparent, or whatever the user maybe is, just understanding how they use it is going to really align. Within our Gizmo Hub, we had to think of the experience to be more dynamic because every parent has different needs. Just because a guardian requires that elevated access, they may have a nanny or somebody that requires different access. So a lot of that dictates the experience between the watch and the app and even the location services we provide. So I would say that's probably the advice I would give you, because if you're solving for a customer you don't understand, you're going to develop features and go into a path that doesn't add value.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think with your experience in particular, because it's a family app, there's so many different types of families and so many different setups for what kids are doing after school or with their school or where they're going, that you have to think about all of those different end users, and they're not just users, they're individual people. So it's like thinking about that perspective is really tough, and bringing that all into one experience and then balancing requests from all those different audiences is it's a big challenge, but it seems like you guys have done a really good job so far. And I'm sure there's more cooking that you're excited about too. So yeah, it's been really interesting. Um, I think that's all the questions we have. I think I'm getting some messages here. We're going to pull up the QR code where we do have a ebook about telco where we talk about some of the big challenges, not just in the consumer wearable space, but in telco as a whole, from the network side of the house to other, parts of the platform that Mapbox supports. There is some stuff in here about IoT that I think will touch on some of the themes we talked about today. But yeah, there's a QR code if you want to check that out. While we still have you, Isaac, is there any parting thoughts you have for us, or anything that you think we didn't cover that we should be talking about when it comes to telco?
I think there's a lot of questions in the QA. I'm looking through it, and I wish we had more time. There's some really good questions, and I encourage you to do some research. But Kieran, thank you for having this. Was great, and hopefully we do this again next year.
Yeah,
Thank you
definitely.
all.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. I think that's everything. Yeah, and thanks everyone for coming. As we said before, the recording and any recordings from any of the sessions today will be available at mapbox.com/build. So if you want to rewatch this because it was so exciting and you want to hear Isaac's perspective, run it back again, you can do that. But those will all be available, and we'll share those out for those that registered, and you should be able to see any of that content from today. So uh, yeah, thanks again for everyone for coming. And we'll do another one of these hopefully next year, or maybe before that, we'll do a webinar or something. So thanks again, Isaac, for joining us.
Thanks again for having us.
Thanks, everyone.